Destruction Warlocks specialise in raining down hellfire upon their enemies, and I'm going to show you how to play them in the Season 1 of the War Within. It's going to be very beginner-friendly, and it's also going to be very veteran-friendly. So I'm just going to tell you everything, basically, but in a beginner-friendly manner. So looking at the stat priorities, starting off, I like to jump straight in with no nonsense. Intellect is, of course, your main stat. Getting a higher and higher eye level or item level of gear is always going to be the play. That is the best way to up your intellect and secondary stats. The priority of your secondary stats should be loosely followed as per this graphic here. However, I do want to say that getting a higher eye level is always going to be an increase in power and damage, and you should only be comparing secondary stats if, one, you're doing very high level content. Beginners and intermediate players, you're really not going to have an issue. And again, higher eye level is always better, but also only if you're actually comparing two items of the same eye level. Again, higher eye level is generally always going to be better. Looking at the secondary stats then, haste actually increases how quickly you can attack and how quickly you cast your spells. Critical strike, of course, increasing the chance to do more damage. Mastery is a more interesting one. For us Destruction Warlocks, it is chaotic energies. Your spells deal increased amount of damage, plus a random amount of up to 17% additional increased damage. Kind of random. It's an interesting mastery. I think it's honestly quite lazy for Destruction Warlocks. Some classes are a lot more interesting, but hey, that's fine. And that is unique to every spec. So that's what we have as Destruction. And then Versatility, which is the same for every class. It increases damage and any healing done, while also simultaneously reducing damage taken. While we're here, I want to take a quick look at the set bonus for Season 1 of the War Within that you're going to be getting. Incinerate critical strike is increased, and Conflagrate in critical strike chance is also massively increased. The 4 set, when your Conflagrate spell critically strikes, your fire damage is massively increased for 6 seconds. A lot of our spells will be fire damage, and this is a really nice set bonus. It's basically adding a chance for some of our spells to crit, and when one of them does crit, all fire damage we do is then increased. Quite straightforward. If you don't know these spells, I will be going through them in complete detail in the rotation part of this video shortly. Now moving on to some of the utilities and defensives that we actually have available to us as a Warlock. This left action bar up here is things that we're more doing to our enemy, and the ones on the right are more things we're doing to enhance combat or life for us and our allies. This isn't an absolutely extensive list, but it's the ones that I think you should be most aware of and that are going to be the most useful to you. So first up on the left here, we've got Fear. Strikes fear into the enemy, disorient them for 20 seconds, and damage has a chance to cancel that effect. So they're going to run in fear when we use fear. We then have a few curses that we can use, and depending on the talents, etc. you might have different ones. Curse of Tongues forces the target to speak in demonic tongues, increasing the casting time of all their spells by 30% for a minute. We've also got Exhaustion, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 12 seconds. And the Satyr increases the time between enemies' attacks by 20% and the casting time of all spells by 30% for 2 minutes. And these are different curses we can put on our enemy to hinder their combat prowess. Going over to the right-hand side, we have things that we can do to help our allies, including creating a soul well. Now, this is a kind of multi-purpose version. When you click this soul well, you're going to gain health stones. Your allies can click this to get health stones. And I imagine it's like a healing potion, basically, they can use. You can also just create a health stone on its own. You can see here it restores 25% health. So soul well is one that you can click and your allies can get some before you go into combat, or the health stone just if you just want to make one for yourself. Dark Pact is another one that's really interesting. It's going to sacrifice 20% of your current health to shield you for 200% of that sacrificed health, plus an additional amount for 20 seconds. And you can use it if you are suffering from movement impairing effects. So if someone's tried to slow you down and then, slow you down, then beat you down, you can use Dark Pact while that is happening. So we're going to sacrifice 20% of health to then actually shield ourselves for a huge amount larger than that. We also have Demonic Gateway. This is amazing. So I can put one here. I can't use it here. I'm going to jump off this building. Okay, well, I can't show you, apparently, but basically it's going to create a demonic gateway between two locations, and you can teleport. So let's say you're trying to get around enemies, you're trying to cross a bridge, whatever you're doing, wherever it may be, just getting around, you know, the kind of arena that you're in. Demonic gateway is going to be really good for you and your allies to be able to do that. Unending Breath, probably not going to use this very much in combat, but I just thought I'd let you know about it. Allows an ally to breathe underwater and increases their swim speed. And this is a really interesting one, Soul Burn. It's going to consume a soul shard. So you can see here on my UI, there's these little purple icons. These are soul shards. And some of your spells are going to generate soul shards in your rotation, and then we can spend them. So what Soul Burn does is it consumes a soul shard, unlocking secret powers of your spells. So your demonic circle teleport, so, you know, from your demonic gateway, it increases your movement speed by 50% and makes you immune to snares and roots, speeding that up. Demonic gateway can be cast instantly, so you don't have to do a 1.8 second cast on here. Drain life. Gain an absorb shield equal to the amount of healing done for 30 seconds. The shield cannot exceed 30% of your maximum health. So we do have an ability called Drain Life. Here, draining life from your target, causing shadow damage and healing you for 500% of the damage done. Basically, you're then going to get an absorb shield if you use drain life after using Soul Burn. Health Funnel restores more health. Health Stone increases the healing of Health Stone by 30% and increases your maximum health for a short duration as well. So it basically just enhances a lot of your utility spells, and that is Soul Burn, and that is fantastic as well. Again, not an extensive list. You're not going to be using these spells all the time, but it's just really useful to know the kind of utilities and defensives that we do have available to us. Now on to the super fun part, which is, of course, the rotation. So for destruction in single target, we're going to start off with the raid build. We are going for Hellcaller. The main thing here is your Immolate is replaced with Wither, and we also gain Malevolence. Going to be going through the hero talents in a lot more depth shortly, though. But for now, let's look at the what, when, why. What spells have we got? When are we using them? Why are we using them? So, as I said, we now have Wither. Bestows a vile malediction upon your target, burning the sinew and muscle of its host. How charming. Dealing Shadow Flame damage immediately and over 21 seconds. The periodic damage will generate a Soul Shard fragment and has a 50% chance to generate an additional one on critical strikes. So our Soul Shards are here. Some spells are going to be generating them and some are going to be spending them. We then have Shadow Burn, blasting our target for damage, and we gain 100% critical strike chance on targets that have less than 30% health. Then we've got our Chaos Bolt. This is our main Soul Shard spender, unleashing a devastating bolt of chaos, dealing a critical strike for chaos damage. It's further increased by your critical strike chance as well. Then we've got Conflagrate, which triggers an explosion on the target and reduces the cast time of your next Incinerate or Chaos Bolt by 30% for 10 seconds and generates 5 Soul Shard fragments. Soulfire, burning their soul and applying fire damage and applying Wither. Remember, this is Wither at the start. And then we've got Incinerate at the end, draws fire toward the enemy, dealing fire damage, and again generates some Soul Shards. We've got 2 cooldowns as well, which is Summon Infernal and Malevolence. I'm going to explain these now. So Summon Infernal from the Twisting Nether, impacting for a massive amount of fire damage. It's like a meteor basically coming down and stunning all enemies. The Infernal will serve you for 30 seconds, dealing damage to all nearby enemies and generating Soul Shard fragments. And then we've got Malevolence, which you can use every single minute. This is from your hero talents. Dark magic erupts from you and corrupts your soul for 20 seconds, causing enemies suffering from your Wither to take damage and increase its stat count. While corrupted, your haste is increased and spending soul shards damaging spells grants more stacks of Wither. So looking at the priority then, number 1 is to keep Wither up on our target at all times. After that, we don't want to cap our Shadow Burn. If we've got maximum soul shards, or if we, are capping on stacks, you can see here, it's nearly going up to 2 stacks again. We don't want to cap that. It's a waste. So if we're nearly maxed on soul shards or we're capping like we are now, then use your Shadow Burn at this point in the priority list. If that is not the case, but you are still capping on soul shards, use your Chaos Bolt. This will cost 2 soul shards. And then again, if we've got 2 stacks, use your Conflagrate, We do have a talent here called Roaring Blaze as well, which is why we're also using Conflagrate at this point. Conflagrate increases your Soulfire, Wither, Incinerate, and Conflagrate damage to the target for 8 seconds. We want to keep that up at all times on our target as well. So again, make sure you're not capping out on there and you're keeping up that debuff. The next one is Soulfire, and specifically we're trying to keep up this talent here, Decimation. When your direct damaging abilities deal a critical strike, they have a chance to reset the cooldown of Soulfire and reduce the cast time of your next Soulfire by 80%. So we're going to use Soulfire here if it is proccing. So if you see this one light up, this is when we're going to use it here. After that point, we're going to still use Shadow Burn, but for a different reason, and that is to keep up Eradication. And that is going to increase how much damage they take from you by 5%. And that is here. Chaos Bolt and Shadow Burn increase the damage you deal to the target by 5% for 7 seconds. So you can use Shadow Burn. If it's out of stacks at this point, you can use Chaos Bolt to do the same thing. And then we can use Soulfire here. So if it's not proccing, use it here. If we're not overcapping on soul shards, as it will generate one, so you can kind of use it on cooldown at this point if it's no procs on it, and then pretty much just using Conflagrate and then Incinerate as filler spells to generate soul shards. So let's just go over that again. We're going to keep up Wither at all times. We're going to use Shadow Burn to make sure we're not capping out on stacks, or if we're capping out on soul shards. Same with Chaos Bolt. When you've got a lot of soul shards, you can use your Chaos Bolt here. You can use Conflagrate to keep up debuffs. Use Soulfire whenever it procs. Use Shadow Burn to also keep up Eradication. Oh, and there's the proc, so we're going to use our Soulfire there. You can see how much quicker it is. And then we're going to use Conflagrate any remaining stacks and Incinerate pretty much as filler. So again, keep up with it at all times. Use your Shadow Burn. Use your Chaos Bolt to, spend those soul shards and any procs. Keep up debuffs with your Conflagrate. Use your procs on Soulfire. Using your Shadow Burn. Chaos Bolt can also keep up Eradication, and then using any remaining stacks of Conflagrate and then spamming with Incinerate as your filler spell. You're going to use your Infernal and then Malevolence on pull. So get up with use your Shadow Burn and spend your Chaos Bolt to get, what's it called? Eradication, up, and then use your Infernal and Malevolence and then carry on. After that point, use these on cooldown. So basically, use these three first spells, then use your cooldowns, then carry on with the rotation, and then use these on cooldown anyway. So that's kind of the opener, and then rotation, if that makes sense. And that is the raid rotation that you are going to be doing. So for this Destruction Warlock build, I'm going with the Hellcaller hero talents. And I must say, I absolutely love it. So the first things first, Immolate is going to be replaced by Wither, okay? It bestows a vile malediction upon the target, burning the sinew and muscle of the host, dealing Shadow Flame damage immediately and an additional amount over 18 seconds. I will also say that periodic damage generates one soul shard fragment and has a 50% chance to generate an additional on critical strikes. So it's replacing Immolate with a more powerful version that's going to do some other things, which I love. I actually do love Warlock hero talents. Zalen's Ferocity. Fire damage dealt by your spells and abilities is increased, and your fire spells gain more critical strike from all sources. Aura of Enfeeblement. While an ending resolve is active, enemies within 30 yards are affected by Curse of Tongues and Curse of Effectiveness, Curse of Weakness. Just getting more curses out there. Mark of Xavius, Wither damage is increased, and Blackened Soul deals 2% increased damage per stack of Wither. Oh, sorry, Blackened Soul is here. Wither, remember, is the spell that is replacing your Immolate. Blackened Soul. Spending soul shards on damaging spells will further corrupt your enemies affected by your Wither. And that is going to increase its stack count. So whenever we spend soul shards on an enemy that has Wither, the stacks of Wither are going to increase. Each time Wither gains a stack, it has a chance to collapse, consuming a stack every 1 second to deal massive amounts of Shadow Flame damage to its host until only one stack remains. So Mark of Xavius, that's going to basically, Blackened Soul is going to do more damage per stack of Wither. Bleak Heart Tactics, Wither damage again is increased by 20%. When Wither gains a stack from Blackened Soul, it has a chance to gain an additional stack on top of that. Seeds of their Demise. After Wither reaches 8 stacks, or when its host reaches 20% health, so in the execute phase, basically, it's going to deal, it's basically going to do the same thing. It's going to deal Shadow Flame damage to its host every second until only 1 stack remains. When Blackened Soul deals damage, you have a chance to gain 2 stacks of Flashpoint. On the right-hand side, you've got Zalen's Cruelty. Shadow damage dealt by your spells and abilities is increased, and shadow spells gain more critical strike from all sources. Passive damage there. Defensive next up. Zevram's Resilience. Dark Pact heals you a lot more. So it's going to heal you for a hot, heal over time for every second it's active, as well as the main amount that it will heal you. Mark of Perifan. Critical strike damage dealt again by Wither is increased. Again, if you've forgotten, Wither is this one again. Wither has a chance to gain a stack when it critically strikes. Stacks gained this way do not activate Blackened Soul, however. And lastly, Malevolence. It's on a 1 minute cooldown, so I would advise to use this as much as you can. Hold off a little bit if you've got like Bloodlust or something coming in, but generally, you know, it's on a short cooldown. We can use this as much as we want and should do. Dark magic erupts from you and corrupts your soul, causing enemies suffering from your Wither to take Shadow Flame damage and increase its stat count by 6. Massive burst damage then on our Wither. While corrupted, your haste is increased by a massive 8%, and spending soul shards gains additional stacks of Wither. I would literally just use this on cooldown, as long as, of course, somebody has Wither on them. And that is the Hellcaller hero talents we're using. If any of that has overwhelmed you a bit, don't worry. You know, it's all involved in the rotation that I've already shown you, so you don't need to worry about that. It's more just going through why we're taking it, etc. So now going into the Mythic Plus side of things, if we just change over the talents, one thing is that we are changing over from Hellcaller. If you are a beginner, etc., you can stay in Hellcaller if you like. It's okay. But for better AoE damage, Diabolist will be a lot better, and therefore in Mythic Plus and Dungeons, Diabolist is going to be better. You can see here, we're changing a few talents over in the main talent tree as well. It's going to go back because I was yapping. So these are the talents we're mainly changing here. It's these three. These are better for AoE, of course. So the rotation is changing a little bit in Mythic Plus. It's not like completely changed. It's the same sort of premise, just with the hero talents, where we're summoning these huge pit lords and stuff. A few of our spells are going to be changed at points. So let's go over those now. So first up, keep Immolate up on your target. With the previous hero talent we showed, that was Wither, but now it's just back to normal old Immolate. Keep this up at all times on your target. If you get a proc on your Chaos Bolt, it's called Ruination, and that is from here. You can see that sometimes when you summon a Pit Lord, your next Chaos Bolt will become Ruination, and the spell will completely change its look. Whenever that changes on your Chaos Bolt, use it as the second topmost priority in your rotation. So keep up Immolate. If Chaos Bolt changes into Ruination, then use that. And also do use it here if you have one of your big Pit Lord, mummy and daddies up as well. We'll be going through that fully in the hero talents part, so don't worry. And then again, if you're capping on soul shards, use your Shadow Burn here. Use your Chaos Bolt if you're still capping on soul shards. Sorry, did I say that right? Use Shadow Burn if you're capping on soul shards, and then if you don't have stacks, use Chaos Bolt to not cap on soul shards here. So similar to the raid rotation. After that, you've got Incinerate, but you're only using it here if, again, it has turned into Infernal Bolt. Where is it? Here we go. Mother of Chaos empowers your next Incinerate to become Infernal Bolt. So sometimes you'll be, summoning these big demons, and they'll make your Incinerate into a Infernal Bolt instead. If you see this spell change, use it at this point in the priority list. Again, we're keeping up Conflagrate for the same reason as before with the Roaring Blaze talent here. After that, again, if you get a proc on your Soulfire, use it here. And then use your Shadow Burn and your Chaos Bolt to keep up Eradication, same as in the raid rotation, using Soulfire here, and then Chaos Bolt, and then, Conflagrate, and then Incinerate, just like in the raid rotation, kind of as your fillers. If you're at this point in the priority list with nothing else to press, then again, we're just going to be using the Soulfire, then any remaining Conflagrates, and then Incinerates. So again, keep up Immolate at all times. If Chaos Bolt turns into Ruination, then use it here. Don't cap on Soul Shards. Use Shadow Burn. Oh, and there's your Infernal Bolt. That's what I was talking about. Then use Chaos Bolt here. Again, if you're capping, use any procs on it. and then use any procs on your Incinerate there, as you just saw. Then use Conflagrate to keep up the proc. And then we're using Shadow Burn. There's Ruination, so that's your second most important one. Boom, huge Meteor there. And then just using Chaos Bolt and Shadow Burn to keep up Eradication. Using Soulfire if you still have the stack to use at this point. And then Conflagrate and Incinerate at the end here. And that pretty much is the Mythic Plus rotation. So although it can look a bit more complex than the Raid rotation, it really isn't. You're really only pressing certain buttons like Incinerate here and Chaos Bolt here when they completely change the look of the spell. And you're only pressing Soulfire here when you get a proc. And same pretty much with using Infernal. Use it kind of here in the rotation and use it on cooldown. Remember here, we're using these at this point to keep up Eradication. That is this talent here. Remember, we're using our Conflagrate here to keep up our Roaring Blaze talent here. A lot of these are just really procs that we are following. Now let's have a look at the hero talents in detail that we are now taking in this Mythic Plus rotation. For this build, we are going with Diabolist. Basically, you're going to be summoning big, huge demons from the Twisting Nether in this build, and it's actually really cool. So, the first one is Diabolic Ritual. Spending a soul shard on a damaging spell grants that ritual for 20 seconds. And when it's active, every soul shard that you spend on a damaging spell reduces its duration. So basically, you get this demonic ritual for 20 seconds. Every time you spend a soul shard, you're reducing the duration, and you want that duration to end as quickly as possible, because when it does, you gain demonic art, causing your next Chaos Bolt, Rain of Fire, or Shadow Burn to summon an Overlord, Mother of Chaos, or Pit Lord, unleashing a devastating attack. So a big daddy demon. So what do those daddy demons do then? Enemies damaged by your Overlord have their souls cleaven, increasing damage they take from you and your pets. Cool. Utility one here, Howl of Terror, I'm going for. Cooldown is reduced and range is increased. Fire damage is increased and damage dealt by your demons is increased. Okay, cool, very passive. Demonic Art increases the damage of your next Chaos Bolt, Rain of Fire, or Shadow Burn and reduces its cast time. That's the spell that's going to trigger your demons being summoned. So basically, when they're ready to be summoned and you use that next spell, it's going to also be doing more damage. Then another choice node, I like to go for Infernal Machine. Spending soul shards on damaging spells while your Infernal is active decreases the duration of Diabolic Ritual by another second, quickly hastening how quickly we can get those demons out. Abyssal Domination. Summon Infernal becomes empowered, dealing 40% increased damage. When your Summon Infernal ends, it fragments into smaller Infernals at 50% effectiveness. I think this is insane and I love it. I do think that this tree is a lot more suited to demonology because we're summoning so many demons with it. And I do think they should have changed it up a bit to be a bit more like, maybe rather than huge daddy demons, which you'd expect in demonology, maybe in destruction, we could have had like meteors. There's like 3 different types of meteors or something like that. I just feel like it would have been, I feel like they've made it too demonology focused, which in demonology is great, but we're in destruction. So, you know what I mean? Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. Mother of Chaos empowers your next Incinerate to instead become an Infernal Bolt. Hurling a bolt enveloped in Infernal Flames to the Abyss, dealing damage. Basically, it's going to generate some soul shards. Your next Incinerate is super duper. Here is another utility. Unending Resolve grants Soul Leech equal to 10% of your maximum health. Can leech more. Gloom of Nathraza. Enemies marked by your Havoc take increased damage from your single target spells. Pretty nice there. And finally, Ruination. Summoning a Pit Lord causes your next Chaos Bolt to instead become Ruination. Calling down a demon-infested... See what I mean? It's so demonology focused. Calling down a demon-infested meteor from the depths of the Twisting Nether, dealing chaos damage on impact, and summoning one Diabolic Imp. Damage is further increased by your critical strike chance and is reduced beyond 8 targets. Cool. It's going to be happening passively again when you summon the Pit Lord. It's a kind of cycle here in the rotation where you spend a soul shard, granting Diabolic Ritual. Some of your spells decrease that length. Once it gets to 0, you get demonic art, causing one of your next spells to rain down a big demon. And then when you summon that demon, it then causes your next Chaos Bolt to become Ruination, which summons more demons down. So, there's a real cycle happening here. But yeah, it's very demonology focused. I don't want to be a big Debbie Downer. I do think it's a really, really cool hero talent. I just think it's a bit, I don't know. Let me know your opinions in the comments. I'd love to hear if you agree with me or not. But that is the Diabolist hero talents that we will be taking. Now moving on to the consumables and also the enchants. So I'm starting off with the enchants here. So one thing you're going to notice is these Nerubian gem weavers. These are what you get in your vault every week to add sockets to your gear, and you can now add a socket to your head, wrist and waist. You'll also see there's magnificent jewelers settings. Basically, this is for adding sockets to your gear as well. In Dragonflight, you could add or have up to 3 sockets on your neck, but now in the War Within, you can have 2 on your neck, 2 on each ring as well for 6. 6 magnificent jeweler settings, and I really like this change. Now looking at the enchants we're having, on our cloak, it's the Chant of Winged Grace, which is avoidance and fall damage protection. Crystalline Radiance on the chest is primary stat. Armored Avoidance is avoidance. Spell Thread, this gives on the legs intellect and stamina. Scout's March gives movement speed, and then we're going to add Critical Strike on both of our rings. Stonebound Artistry, this gives you a chance for, I think it's Mastery. Oh my god, I've forgotten. Yes, it gives you Mastery. I've nearly learnt them all off by heart. You can also go for the Authority of Radiant Power, which will just give you a flat intellect buff as well. So up to you on those two. On the consumables, I would go for the Flask of Alchemical Chaos. Basically, this is actually quite an interesting one. It's going to give you a massive amount of secondary stat. I think it's like 7,000 or something, but it's going to take off 600 of your other 2 secondary stats, and this will rotate every 30 seconds. You could also just go for a Flask of Tempered Versatility for a little bit less DPS, but more kind of overall survivability. The Everything Stew is an option on the food, giving you a secondary stat, or you can just go for the Feast of Divine Day or Midnight Masquerade, pretty much giving you primary stat instead. Tempered Potion, this is going to give you secondary stats as well. Algari Healing Potion is obviously your healing potion. Mana Oil gives you crit and haste. And then Crystallized Augment Rune, which are going to be very expensive, but it will give you a small amount of primary stat as well. Then on the sockets, we're going to be using a Culminating Blasphemite. Basically, what this does is it gives you primary stat, and then it gives you 0.15% critical strike effect per color of other gem you have. So if you've got 1 ruby, 1 sapphire, 1 emerald, and 1 onyx, you're going to get 0.6% critical effect. Whereas if you've got all rubies, you're only going to get 0.15%. So you need to use different colored gems. Once you've got one of each 4, you can use like a Masterful Ruby on or Versatile Ruby. It doesn't really matter. You could use whatever you kind of want after that, depending on what secondary stats you're needing at that point. But I would probably sim your character at that point. Once you've got more than 4, depending on the gear you get, to see exactly what stat would actually benefit you the most. But TLDR, make sure you've got at least 1 of each coloured gem on your gear so that your Culminating Blasphemite can get its full potential. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for The War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVUI, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.